Welcome back to Federal Insights, measuring cyber risk in your digital supply chain, sponsored by RiskRecon, a MasterCard company here on Federal News Network. My guest today is John Arrett. He's the Vice President of Strategy and Risk for RiskRecon, and I'm Tom Temin. And let's get down to some of the technologies and tools you specifically need. We were talking about self-attestation, that everything is hunky-dory by software vendors, which is okay as far as it goes. But I think they want to be verified, if nothing else, for their own knowledge. But you, as the software buyer, the agency as the software buyer, needs a little bit more than that. So let's talk about some of the specifics of making sure that that supply chain of your software is, in fact, secure.
Sure. And I think the first one that everyone will start with is going to be that self-attestation. As much as we say that it might have some holes in it, it's a point in time sort of thing. It still has some value and it has some things that traditionally we'll always have to do. But I think you marry that with things like, a continuous monitoring tool from a cyber perspective that's going to give you kind of what happens in between those point in time assessments, the validation of what they're telling you in that self-attestation. Things like, negative news is something going on at that organization. Is the CEO under indictment? Did the CFO sell a bunch of stock right before something, bad? Those sorts of things. Where do we stand from a geopolitical risk standpoint? Financial risk and financial risk. I think, coming from the cyber world, we tend to want to stay away from financial risk. But when you really start to think about it, if we're talking about criticality of applications, right, and the availability of them, oftentimes in this world we care just about the breach of information. But if we start looking at the availability side of things, if we have a software supplier for an agency that's maybe it's a critical supplier, something that they rely heavily on, that organization undergoes a ransomware attack and they're not viable for the time being. If you marry that information with the financial risk information, maybe that particular software supplier was kind of tenuous when it comes to their financial health. So now you got to start to wonder, because of this cyber event, are they going to actually go out of business? And then suddenly we have a hole that we can't fill because it's a critical application that company no longer exists. So I think you got to start to get creative in what you're doing. I actually used to use data from cyber tools to start to forecast hurricane impact on my supply chain, which vendors might not be available to me because of coming hurricanes and that sort of thing. So I think as organizations, we need to start to look at, having a subset of tools that you're using to kind of build that picture for yourself. It's not just one and done. It's a continuous thing, because risk isn't a once a year thing. Risk is, it changes dynamically every hour or every minute or every day, right?
Yeah. So in other words, the balance sheet, then a third party look at some of those things and external events that are reported, especially if they're a publicly reported company, that would happen to them.
Any edge you can get to get that greater situational awareness, I think, is what's needed, right? And not everybody can go, so far down the rabbit hole that they're going to get everything. But I think as far as you can bear going to get that level of situational awareness is what I would advise doing.
And I guess if a company is in financial distress that is also a supplier to your agency, that could be an indication that to ask at least, where might they be trying to save money?
Right.
And perhaps one more round of quality control, one last round of cyber checks. Maybe they feel you can dispense with it, or at least you could ask them about it.
And oftentimes we see that bear out in the cyber hygiene of an organization when we're looking from the outside looking in. When they start to have financial problems, they start to invest a little less in the security team. Right. So then you start to see things that would have been in place previously. Maybe best practices start to fall off, holes start to get opened up, stuff gets done shoddily, and eventually you have another, a breach of the software supply chain or, a breach of the vendor themselves.
And when you buy mechanical goods or physical goods, you can often stress test them, pressure test them, in place test them, stress them, whatever this might be. Can you do that with software, and can you do that with your own tools that may not have been employed by the vendor?
Yeah, I think in some cases you can do that. If you're talking about tools that you're buying from an assessment standpoint, I think any company will allow you to stress test their tools and see if they do what they need. As far as stress testing the vendor, I think it pays to be in kind of lockstep with them, right? Get involved in things like disaster recovery tests and things like that, and make sure that they have plans for all of that sort of stuff in place. Help, like, oftentimes vendors sometimes are very niche and they're small and they don't have the capabilities that you're looking for. In those cases, be a partner, work with them, help bring them along to make sure that that you're helping to secure them. And really the net effect of that is the rising tide raises all ships. So you might be one federal agency that's helping a vendor to be better, and the net effect is you're also helping a bunch of other federal agencies be secure because they don't have to worry about that one particular vendor again. So,
but I also meant testing the code itself. Can you run?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think that's not something that I typically get into, but yeah, I think you can, depending on who you are, you can always get access to the code and stress that sort of stuff.
Sure. And we were talking earlier about their relationships with third party, second and third party relationships the vendors themselves might have that could affect what it is they deliver to you as the agencies. What are the challenges, in understanding those second, third, even fourth level relationships, their subs and the subs to the subs and so on?
Yeah. I think the challenge is in many cases, and I'll preface this with two ways to answer this. If we're talking a traditional vendor, right? It's a traditional supplier, not a software supplier. In many cases, you have a direct contract with that supplier. You have audit rights to be able to go and assess them, their security, make sure that they're on the up and up, that they're financial health, all that sort of stuff. But for their suppliers, your fourth party, you don't have any of those rights, right? You have to rely on your vendor, your supplier, to do that for you. And the challenge is being able to get visibility into those. If maybe your vendor doesn't have a program to do that sort of stuff, how do you get visibility into those organizations? And you can do that through things like a continuous monitoring tool where you don't need permission to assess a company. You can get at least some rough idea of what their cyber hygiene looks like just by pointing a tool at it and reporting back to you. When it comes to the software supply chain, it gets even a little more tricky because oftentimes, we say in a traditional supplier relationship, the fourth party won't respond to your questionnaire, those sorts of things. In the software supply chain, oftentimes the software suppliers themselves, your direct relationship where you're buying from, well, you usually don't have any audit rights with them, right? It's just a transaction. You're just buying a piece of software. You generally don't have the right to go perform a security audit of the company, see what they're doing, because many times they'll come back and say, well, I don't have your information. There's no reason for you to audit me. I'm just giving you a piece of software. So in those cases, you have to rely on the other tools in that Swiss Army knife, the continuous monitoring tools, the negative news. What picture can I paint about the posture of this organization if they won't tell me anything? And then you can, the further you go, if it's fourth, fifth, I came out of the banking world originally, and they were talking about fifth, sixth, and seventh party, which is insane because the challenges that we face, not only about getting the responses to them, really also we face challenges from a staffing perspective, right? It's hard enough to assess our immediate vendors and our immediate software suppliers, let alone their vendors and their vendors and their vendors. So it's a really tough problem to tackle and to scale.
Yeah, in banking, you could get as far down as, who makes the ink in the passbook printing machines or something. To make a really
banking regulators, if anyone happened to be listening from any regulating federal agencies, they're definitely very prescriptive in what they want you to do. God bless them, but yeah, it makes it really challenging as a practitioner. I'll say that.
And the other issue is so many federal agencies are putting workloads into commercial clouds, their own software in a commercial cloud, but then they're using a lot of services that are software that are associated with the execution of that hosting and so on, the infrastructure, if you will, as a service. And then they're also buying software as a service directly, as opposed to buying a packaged thing you install on your own server. Very different situations that invoke response on security. Talk about some of the issues for software as a service and for cloud hosting and the services associated with that.
Yeah, things like Amazon, AWS, Azure, the Google Cloud, those can be particularly challenging when you're trying to gain assurance of how something's protected, not because of Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, but a typical response that you'll get from a lot of suppliers when you're asking them, hey, are you secure? And they'll write back and say, sure, we are. We use AWS, and here's AWS's SOC 2. But we know as practitioners that that model is really a shared security model, right? All SaaS stuff, software services, cloud hosting, it's really a shared security model. The AWSs of the world, the Azures, the Google Cloud, they do their piece pretty well, right? We very rarely see massive issues on that side of the fence. But your suppliers also have a piece of that they need to be, they're responsible for. And how many times, Tom, have we seen in the past where Amazon S3 buckets have been exposed? It wasn't because Amazon did something wrong. The people configuring the S3 bucket configured them wrong. So it's a shared model, and we can't just say just because the corporate side of it, the Amazon, the Azure, the Google piece is good, that it's all good. We actually have to be able to look at both. And there's ways that you can do that by going to ask specific questions that are akin to what your supplier's piece of it is and how they're configuring things. And it's tough. We spent some time in end of 2020, beginning of 2021, dealing with this sorts of things and putting together some free material just to be able to do this for customers, because it is a challenge. How do you assess something that's very specific? Software as a service in general is maybe a little bit easier because you can kind of look at certain things, but even those you might be dealing with a company that's a SaaS offering, but in the end they're really also hosted by AWS or something like that. So just know that because they're hosted by somebody professional like that, a big name company, doesn't necessarily mean they're secure. It's a shared model. One half probably is good. Know how to do the other half.
All right. Well, you've given federal agencies a lot of good advice here on this. I'd like to thank today's guest. John Arrett is the Vice President of Strategy and Risk for Risk Recon, a MasterCard company. I'm Tom Temin. You're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, please visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Risk Recon.